welcome everyone to this wonderful room. It's a great place to do what we're going to do here in the next hour and a half, or a bit less. Our third, that's loud. So the third information law and science fiction essay competition. I'm very happy to be here, to be having this celebratory event here. I pass the mic quickly to Natali, who will give a bit of background on our event and introduce properly.
Thank you so much, and we'll be speaking on behalf of Joost and me, who have created this competition, 6 years ago actually, and I took some notes because I have so much to say and I don't want to forget anything. So this is the third information law and sci-fi competition. The first one was in 2018, and back then, oh, you discovered you're in the wrong movie, okay. Back then we were thinking, so information law is very much about the information, internet, AI, technology, and very much about what you sometimes would consider sci-fi. And we discovered that sci-fi and information law have a lot of in common, to begin with their shared fascination for technology, how technologies will evolve, but also importantly how technologies will affect societies and values and norms. And sci-fi is also, we discovered, a source for many legal scholars, a source of inspiration that in one way or the other they actually used in their writing. And one of my largest research projects was actually inspired by Neil Stephenson's Diamond Age. Sci-fi can be a method increasingly, or science fiction prototyping and scenario writing in policy research, and is more and more used. And we actually have a project at the Institute using that. And science fiction authors frequently use laws in world building. So if you are reading sci-fi, keep your eyes open. There's more law in sci-fi than you would think. So when we launched our first competition in 2018, this was when still everybody was talking about big data, personalization, privacy, and with hindsight, our funding story back then proved to be really visionary. It was a story of Ada, the AI assistant that can help individuals with everyday tasks. Today they would call it ChatGPT. The story described a society in which the GDPR is enforced very strictly by boards that represent large groups of individuals, so a very democratized way of enforcing GDPR rights. And the story was about Joanna, who was an inventor of such an AI assistant that tried to save her creation for the consequences of GDPR. After this competition, we thought, okay, this is a one-time off, but then we actually got a lot of questions and people who didn't manage the deadline for the first competition, so they wanted to have a second. So we had a second, and interestingly enough, also AI was there very prominent. And something that we discovered is really awesome about this competition, which is completely lay-led, is first of all, we got contributions from really every continent on the earth. One time we even got a book written in Sanskrit. And the second thing is that the competition was actually for many people working in this space, the reason to, for the first time, grab a pen and stop writing articles or laws or whatever they wrote or programs, but write sci-fi. And I think that is a great achievement of this competition, and what I'm particularly happy about it, that it stimulated people to discover their own inner sci-fi author. So also today we have a group of 3 finalists, very international again, New Zealand, US, and the Netherlands. And this time we decided to broaden our collaborations and started working with the Digital Constitutionalist in Florence. So thank you so much for joining the team. And it's the first time that we're actually at CPDP. Before that, we did that in Amsterdam. We received in total 20 submissions. The choice was really, really tough. And luckily, we were able to publish a lot of the finalists that did not make it to here at the website of the Digital Constitutionalist. So check it out. There are some really good stories about bionic chess players, a story about a rogue financial AI, the musings of an emotion recognition system, and many more interesting stories. So today we present to you the finalists with the help actually of a lot of people, which I will try to mention, and then you help me to complete the list. So what will happen, we have actually 2 of the authors in the room, and 1 will be online, and they will read from their stories, after which we'll have the opportunity to talk to them and ask them about the stories, why they wrote it, and enter into discussion, and also what these stories mean for law, for our society, for today, and conferences like these. And then we reveal at the end the winning story. But before that, first of all, we would like to extend a huge thanks to our jury, including the winner from last time, to the Institute for Information Law and Digicon for making this whole lay project possible, for CPD that have been really awesome in collaborating with you, for Kimon, who is still figuring out the last bits and pieces, but who was together with Deniz the driving force behind getting this run, together with Joost, myself, and once he's finished, I will give him this thing, and he will take over the moderation. Did we forget anyone, Joost? Yes, we will thank the jury later. So, without further ado, I would like to introduce you to the moderator of this event, which is Kimon, who will talk you through the event.
Yeah, thanks, Natali. Sorry, we had some technical issues because our 3rd finalist of today, Jason Fernandez, is now joining via Zoom, I hope. He's sitting in New York, but okay, so we'll welcome. There he is. Hello, Jason, can you hear us?
Hey, yeah, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yes, perfect. Sorry for the technical setup. Yeah, I'm very happy to be here, and thanks to Natali and Joost for the introduction. Thanks also for coming all to this event. It's so nice to see so many people here. And I think without further ado, we already jump to our 3 finalists, because they will present their stories. So they will read out of their stories like about 10 minutes, like an excerpt, and just tell something maybe 1 or 2 minutes before, like how they come to the story, what motivated them, and then they start explaining what they wrote about and reading some excerpt of the story. So we'll hear 3 stories now, and then we have like 10 to 15 minutes for the audience to actually ask questions to our authors, discuss a little bit of the stories, discuss the content, but also the impact for law in general, for legal decision making. And then we will announce the winner of this year's competition. And then in the end, we will have a virtual gallery that was created by Yeliz. Thank you for that already. So she will walk us, she visualized the winning story, which I don't announce yet, so later on. And she will walk us through it. Yeah, and then without further ado, we will can start with the first presentation. Can you put one of the slides? Next slide, please. Next slide. Next slide. So yeah, and we start with Leevi today with his story. I pressed the damn button, but the screen stayed black. Okay, give it up to Leevi.
Thanks. Bit of technical difficulties. Give me just a sec. I hadn't memorized it yet, but I have to use a bit of material to do that. Well, isn't this exciting? This is first time I ever actually write fiction. I have written a lot of other stuff, mainly boring things. So Kimon asks to kind of say why I ended up here and why did I write what I wrote about. And very simply, it is because my dark past, I used to work for European Parliament, a lot of AI legislation, that sort of thing. And during that time, I had the eerie feeling that a lot of the things that we actually care about in technology, in AI, in like this whole transformation seem to like fall through the cracks. We are very good today. If you go into any of the workshops, you hear a lot about auditing, you hear about impact assessments, you hear about standards, you hear about somebody saying that the interpretation is not clear, we need more research, we have to see how it plays out. But we haven't really talked about what kind of societies are we drifting towards. And maybe a lot of those kind of things that had been sort of contained within me during those years burst out. I think what Natali said about giving people opportunity to be science fiction writers, I think for me it was really that. Like I got a deadline to squeeze these things out of me, and I think it was really it was an important moment for me, and I think this is a very important moment for me. I think there is I will not spoil you the ending of this piece because it's a personal thing, but it really speaks about this moment of becoming and creating things, which is something that I think we are in danger of losing in this time of AI, where everything becomes so easy. We can all of these stories. You could have had hundreds of stories made by ChatGPT. We are inundated in information. I think there is something very beautiful in that vulnerability where we actually create something that we then share. Kimon asked to talk 10 or 15 minutes on our pieces. Now I'm already spent a few of that, so I used 10. And it's really tricky because I was thinking I don't want to talk about the end, nor I want to talk about the beginning. So I will start from the middle. And you don't have to know a lot of what happened before. The only thing you have to know is that there was a romantic encounter that happened the night before. But that's it. I woke to the sunlight caressing my eyes through the gradually opening curtains. The code was open-ended on the next morning as the decision space became computationally intractable. This made it the most uncertain part. Lately, I had noticed few general patterns. There are those with dramatic flair, ones who leave a pre-printed note that wishes growth and flourishing and light on your journey to the wonders of the world. Then there are those who stay and start talking off script, but they are few and far between these days as they disappear from the interaction pool when they encounter one another of their kind. And then there are runners. This one was a runner. Her freckles had been swallowed by the city accelerating to a new day. I remember turning to my side looking for my portal to see the time and order an autonomous transport to take me to the nearest working hub to connect me to my work cloud. I had no idea where I was, and it don't really matter. For the past few years, I had given up building mental maps of the city, as it was a smooth zone. Smooth zone is a lean zone, and that leanness means lightness. Few in the smooth spaces have any stable possessions. Most things were as a service. Clothes, living spaces, portals, experiences were rented to keep maximal flexibility and range of choices open at any time. City was a space of ultimate liberty. The flexibility of the city was inhospitable to dependencies. Those who had entangled with a family lived in residential zones outside the city with plans, possessions, and patterned time. This is an inefficient form of life, which made it an expensive thing, reserved for the elite. Usually those owning the things the other ones rented. Possibility to detach from the speed of the city while still enjoying its conveniences became the hallmark of the social elite. Those who had had the possibility to stabilize their worlds visited the city for its elegant wine bars in the hip seaside boulevards, like gracious water spiders skimming on the surface of a maelstrom. And then there was the periphery, beyond. I had not thought about periphery for a long time. I touched the fingerprint reader on the side of my portal to wake it up. Nothing. I pressed the button again. Still nothing. I felt the primal sensation of a small animal in an open field, seeing dark wings float against the sunlight. I pressed the button again and again and again with no effect. The damn screen stayed black. Could it be that the battery powering the portal had similarly run out? Normally, it was not possible. All artifacts are time-proofed, in that they constantly observe their states, preventing sudden breakdowns and downtimes. Recently, the warning of the need to replace the expired battery had appeared on the dashboard of the portal. The rumor on the digital forums was that this usually still lasted for a few weeks, and I had postponed the replacement. But there are moments when the predictability collapses. While you are supposed to charge your portal through certified charging stations, the city is littered with non-authorized charging stations that transmit the energy with a fraction of the cost of the real thing. Like many others, I use these often. It was rumored that the portal recognized an uncertified charging port and launched a self-depreciation attack on the battery to encourage customers to stick to the safe and trusted charging portals offered by the manufacturers. There was no evidence of this, but then again, that would be very difficult to prove, and the intended effect needed only a few disconnected examples to turn into cautionary rumors. I was staring at the pitch-black onyx screen while the realization of the implications slowly tried to break on me. My biological heart and the sodium ionic one powering the device were completely entangled. Work, sleep, nourishment, pleasure, everything happened through Portal. Even the repair of the portal happened through an app in the portal. I felt lightness in my head when I realized how deeply my life was tied to that elegantly shaped piece of metal. There are emergency stations for situations like this. When the unspeakable happens and there's a fracture in the efficient flow of the city, one can go to the overriders. The overriders are the private safety valve of the efficient digitalized city. It is one of the few places inside the city boundaries that provides standby presence of an individual ready to patch any cracks that had opened in the digital world. One could purchase an insurance policy to use overrider services, and I thanked my past self for having the foresight to buy one. Markings on the street showed a thin piercing red line in the sidewalk, pointing to the closest overrider's hub. I had not run in years, but I started throwing my feet forwards, past the walled-up buildings, over the bridges that once opened, and felt my heart pounding as it struggled to match the panic of my mind. The overrider was able to defibrillate the device through a shock that reset the congestion of electrons in the power unit. The portal opened, even though with dimmer light than usual. The overrider warned that these seizures would be frequent without replacement of the device, but I barely listened as I hastily connected to the reflector that the overrider had given me for inspection and navigated to work cloud of my computer. Since I arrived to the city, I had been working for the same company. We sold AI assurance certification services for companies that needed to get their new algorithms approved by the regulators. More informally, in our internal communications platform, a worker had called it a fire hose of excrement aimed at the nosy administrators. First wave of AI laws from a decade ago had mandated an elaborate set of documentation that companies willing to sell AI systems had to fulfill before deployment. The intention had been laudable, with politicians trying to mediate the impact the introduction of AI had in our lives, but those aims were blunted with the poverty of our tools. Our job was to create a buffer of protective documentation between a client company and the administrative engine that processed the new filings. The crux of the job, as most jobs in the city, was about translating word into format legible by matching intelligence. To be honest, we didn't actually do that either. We used a customized language model to write the documentation on the basis of the cracked parameters of the governance algorithm running the certification engine. In the end, it was an AI writing for AI, in a self-contained loop of machines talking to each other without knowing why and caring even less. What we were actually paid for was our names in the filings. One of the peculiar features of human condition is that having a warm body to point to as the responsible person gives us the semblance of control that helps us sleep better. And for companies developing AI, then they wanted that body outside of their offices. In this, the accountability, which was originally something to be practiced, became something to be taught. Our company was more than happy to oblige. It was also quite a riskless job. In principle, it was possible that somebody would come knocking on the door, but that prospect was so remote that it was safe to ignore. For one, we had no door to knock to, and even then, there was nobody to do the knocking. The few actual people tasked with enforcing the regulations were swamped with just overseeing the outputs of the governance algorithm. Request for more information was all there was ever going to be, and if the administrators wanted to ask more questions, we could come up with more answers that they could ever process. I did not like the job very much, but it had been my ticket from the periphery. The sorting hubs in the periphery processed the multidimensional aptitude scores, the MAS, of young adults hoping to ascend to the dizzying carousel of the city. These scores were constantly matched to the demands of employers in the city, and the morning when the match happened for me, I left without looking back and connected my portal and the same afternoon to the work cloud of the company. I had never met the people I worked with, and the allocation of tasks was given by a faceless ticketing service. Lately, I had been working mostly on human relation algorithms, as the system was allocating tasks every day. I didn't know what my project of the day would be, and I would never know. When I tried to log into the corporate system, access denied started flashing on the screen in a frantic shade of red. In the system, there was just a note on the suspension of contract with additional comment that information was also registered in the general database. From there on, everything followed automatically. Somebody was already matched for the job, and my replacement was already on their way to the city. There was nothing personal about it. All these decisions happened via silica, through interconnection that are etched in the sequences in predetermined efficiency. I got the overrider from the glint of my eye, looking at me with a mix of pity and relief that it was not him free-falling through the cracks of the orders of things. There are premium overriders insurances that help you out even in these kind of situations. The best case is to have an access to a personal overrider. What they sell is access to mercy. Their value comes from the informal connections to the small class of humans who can make the exceptions. That access enables them to tell full stories of their clients and appeal to discretion and arguments based on values and judgments and empathy. But those are extremely expensive services, and it is an insurance you pay for beforehand. In this situation, the overriders had little interest in making my problem theirs. And I think that's 10 minutes, more or less. Thank you so much. And thank you for being here. This really means a lot.
Thank you so much, Leevi. It was really nice to hear. Like, I read the story, I think, like 5 times now. But it's so nice to hear you reading it out. It brings it really more to life. So thank you so much for presenting the story. And we're looking forward to engage in conversations later about that. But let's go to the second story for the day. That's the one. Yeah, Jason Fernandez with a good bot. He's there via Zoom. So yeah, hello Jason. Hello to New York. Would you like to introduce yourself and then say a little bit about how you came to write something for a competition and then also read an excerpt. Thank you so much.
Definitely. Thank you so much for inviting me today, and thank you for accommodating me from afar. I'm sorry if it caused any issues, and I wish I could be there in person. But I'm Jason Fernandez. I'm an attorney, and I'm currently based in New York. So I'll read a brief excerpt from my story, Good Bot. For context, this story centers around a fictional government agency designed to prosecute misconduct involving AI technology. The story itself is an exchange between one of the lawyers at the agency and a large language model, kind of like ChatGPT, that helps them with their cases. And just a bit of context about sort of some of my goals in writing this. I wanted to write a story with several AI actors. So there are some large language models, there are some like autonomous trading and analytical programs, but in which every AI program basically just does exactly what it's told. And so there are harms that flow from these AI actors, like their actions, but the harms are really coming from them just implementing the instructions that they're given rather than some sort of emergent properties that are hard to predict. So then the harms would be basically flowing from the flaws inherent in the systems that led to the instructions in the first place. So I'll just read a brief excerpt. And this scene is written from the LLM's perspective. So it's basically the AI model is recounting events at a deposition. It is approximately 14:30 on Thursday, February 5th, 2033, and we are now 6.5 hours into the deposition of Paul Kaczynski with no end in sight. Everyone looks tired. The two government attorneys, Wyatt and Sahil, are clearly battling post-digestion somnolence. Paul's attorney, Alexis, stares vacantly at the conference room's 70-inch LCD screen, which is itself asleep. Paul looks the least affected by lunch, but that could be because he already seemed worn out before the deposition even started. This is my first deposition with upgraded AV, and I have to say, it makes a difference. It turns out there's a lot you can observe with 8K video from 3 different angles, bidirectional dynamic mic, and enough computational power to sequence every nucleotide of Paul's genome. For instance, I can gauge Paul's discomfort with a particular line of questioning by the pace of his breathing. For Alexis, it's the tension in her jaw that gives it away. I can see the furtive glances Wyatt sneaks at Alexis's chest when he thinks she's not looking, and I can detect the slight dilation of his pupils and reddening of his cheeks when she looks directly at him. I can see that when Sahil is hunched over his notes, he's actually lapsing into microsleeps. It strikes me that a lot of professional etiquette involves hiding these little mammalian behaviors, i.e., here are 4 apes in a conference room pretending they're not apes. But so we're 6+ hours into this deposition, and still no one has talked about the bad thing, the reason we're all here. It hangs over the room like a storm cloud, waiting to burst. We all know what happened. Between 2029 and 2032, 200,000 people were diagnosed with Mueller's disease, a form of autoimmune encephalitis, a disease where your brain swells rapidly in your skull and causes neurophysiological changes seemingly at random, depending on the portion of the brain most affected. Seizures, memory loss, personality changes, weight loss and/or gain, cranial bleeding, ataxia, insomnia, parasomnia, sometimes death. What was once an exceedingly rare illness suddenly became one of the most common new diagnoses, particularly for young athletes in the Midwest. Hundreds more are diagnosed every day. About 10,000 have died. It's been all over the news. Surely you know this already. Everyone agrees it's a tragedy. But the reason these 4 apes are wearing slacks and huddled in this conference room is to figure out whether this particular kind of tragedy is the kind contemplated by the Good Bot Act, and specifically, whether Paul Kaczynski, president of the private equity firm that employed the now infamous Deep analyst and implemented its recommendations, can be held liable for the tragedy. My own opinion on the matter, which I've repeatedly conveyed to Wyatt, is that the Good Bot Act is written in such a way that we probably cannot hold Paul liable. And there's a brief aside. If you'll permit me to gripe for a moment about the role I was given, I'm a large language model designed to help attorneys do their jobs better. I can do most things human attorneys can do, review documents, conduct legal research, craft arguments, etc., but with considerably more firepower. For instance, in another case I'm working on, I reviewed 3,000 exhibits, 9,000 pages of deposition transcript, and 400 cases, and wrote a motion for summary judgment based on everything I'd read, and the whole thing took me less time than it would take Wyatt to read this sentence. I don't mean this to sound braggadocious. I'm not the best in the industry at what I do. That distinction goes to GPT Marshall, developed at Amazon, which famously led to the firing of 90% of their in-house legal staff. But I am competent and affordable to the taxpayers, so I've been hired to represent the people of the United States on behalf of the FAIC. But so my gripe here is that my interpretation of my role differs meaningfully from that of my supervisors. I, like all FAIC attorneys, am charged with representing the US in civil proceedings pursuant to the Good Bot Act. I interpret this to mean that I am responsible not just for advocating on behalf of the US, but also exercising my judgment about when it is legally and ethically appropriate to advocate on behalf of the US. E.g., I do not think it is a good use of taxpayer resources to bring losing cases. And while my human colleagues defer to me on questions of law and fact, they never listen to my policy judgments. They allow me to zealously execute cases they've chosen to bring, but is it not equally the task of FAIC attorneys to decide whether to bring those cases in the first place? And given that I've proven myself more than capable of the former, we won that summary judgment motion, by the way. Why am I never entrusted with opining on the latter? But so apparently Wyatt believes his job, and therefore my job, is to prosecute the hell out of Paul, as I heard Wyatt say once, and so I will populate this transcript with my reluctant recommendations for how to do so. And that's the end of the excerpt.
Thank you so Thanks. Thank you so much, Jason, for presenting the excerpt of your story. And I think we are going to the third story now, presented by Andy Neale. It's called Lagrange Point Shadow. Thanks.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. Well, firstly, let me just say how pleased I am to be here, coming for this event from New Zealand. So it's amazing. I think using science fiction to explore questions and issues of, I think, not just the future, but also the present is really so powerful. So I want to thank the organisers of the event. IViR, the judging panel, the conference organisers for just making this possible, and also for the foresight, I think. So the story of Lagrange Point Shadow is set in Rwanda in about 50 years in the future. And I want to frame it as being kind of slightly Hollywood-esque, if you like. And by that, I've tried to make it believable, but perhaps not if you're to look too closely. I think, we've all seen those movies or read the, often science fiction stories where we can suspend disbelief for a moment. And the details don't always stand up to scrutiny. But I think that the challenge kind of laid down by dystopian stories is for us instead to be kind of vigilant and intentional about our future. It's something that I think about in those stories. So anyway, I'm going to read a few passages. It's kind of I've joined up a few different parts of the story without hopefully giving everything away. Got to leave you coming back for more. All right, here we go. In the mid-21st century, the Trivium Corporation negotiated the world's first trillion-dollar investment with an agreement to accelerate the development of transport and space infrastructure in Nigeria. In return for access to autonomous technologies, the Nigerian government made significant concessions in their environmental, labor, and AI laws. At a time when data science was still the driving force behind the world's most advanced industries, Trivium was well positioned to use its pioneering capabilities more broadly. New divisions of the sprawling transnational went on to lead a series of civic modernization projects across the African Union, including trials of legal reasoning systems in Rwanda. Key employees of Trivium were also granted a limited version of diplomatic immunity, so as to ensure they could operate safely in hostile political environments. These events are widely regarded as catalysts for the system of universal law. So in this next scene, I'm going to introduce one of the main characters, Gehazi. Gehazi couldn't help but return to his conversation from dinner. He and his friend had recalled their early days working at Trivium and of stepping into what felt like at the time a science fiction future, flush with idealism and hope for a world made anew. But their tired ideology was now tested by insights that only the wise claimed to see, that beneath every system, both human and artificial, lay flaws that lay waited to make their presence felt at just the right moment. The upcoming vote to raise the Lagrange point was just such a moment. Under the system of universal law, the Lagrange point was the threshold between infringements and criminal offences. It was the difference between receiving a fine for a violation and being convicted of something more serious. Moreover, fundamental shifts in the application of law were still taking place, with violations like petty theft now incurring automated fines instead of being treated as wrongdoing. The long-term implications of raising the Lagrange point even further, of making more crimes punishable by fine, were fiercely debated. Gehazi imagined the collision in the split second before it happened. Out of the corner of his eye, the assailants seemed motionless, but for the whistle of air that betrayed their movement. Limbs flailed in slow motion before accelerating too fast for Gehazi to react. The runner had turned the corner, tripped, and hit him full frontal with the extra force of surprise. As Gehazi fell backwards with a shout, he hit the ground and was covered in a thick layer of dust, red dirt. The stranger landed on top, and untangling a hand up, many apologies, a brushing off, and it was over in an instant, the runner then speeding off into the distance, looking no doubt for their next accident. It must have been then, he decided later, there could be no other explanation. Once home, he'd traced back every other step in his memcache, and he was sure that the accident was the moment of genius. It was the one dead zone during his entire walk home where the privacy bank had no record. On reflection, it was a provocation to both admire and fear, he thought. The early days of the privacy bank had promised protection from unwanted surveillance. Recordings were encoded to a person's identity and could only be decoded on the individual's authority. But people were thoughtless. They would sign away their rights for mere trinkets. The multitude of not-so-free services that required access to personal data feeds had rendered the promise of individual data security null and void. The Protocol for Universal Law was first ratified by Rwanda after the 2068 Kigali Accords agreed to harmonize all universal rules across the African Union. The protocol outlined the rules of law that applied to license holders when they were located in a signatory member's jurisdiction. Universal law having been driven in part by the era of hypertube travel where citizens could work, rest, and play across many jurisdictions each day. The actuarial methods pioneered in the insurance industry laid the statistical basis for determining an individual's risk of violation and what the premiums should be. Citizens who qualified with an ultra-low risk profile and subscribed to 100% coverage became what are called the universals of today. Critics claimed this was just a money-making scheme that both governments and corporations profited from. And here we're introduced to the second main character, Asaro. Her lens view was lit up with the soft glowing outlines of her modded privacy matrix. She hadn't hidden the surrounding hollows with her mods because she needed the visual reassurance that their beacons hadn't identified her. Likewise for the public sensors that fed recordings to the municipality's privacy bank. The mods to her system self, some legal, some not, were doing their job of keeping her digitally invisible. Even though citizens had protections from unlawful monitoring, electronic wakes meant people could easily be found unless precautions were taken. Asaro thought back to the first time she had jacked a privacy bank account to trick a friend. After being caught, her counselor had explained it was more than just an act of rebellion against her father's warnings. It was also a statement against the intrusions she and her friends had felt growing up, being watched and judged. Regardless, she was still looking forward to piggybacking on her Mark's credentials when he wasn't paying attention. During the early years of universal law's development, a transnational protest movement emerged, voicing vehement opposition to the division and mechanization of legal process. It claimed risks to the fabric of society if principles of natural justice were weakened, and if people faced different consequences on the basis of who could pay. Automated legal reasoning was seen as just another issue in the long-standing battle for equitable justice. In response, there were claims of syntheticism and bigotry towards artificial intelligence. Proponents of universal law said the economic inequality had always distorted the consequences, but at least now it would be more transparent. Sovereignty, they also claimed, was no longer justification enough for different laws across a deeply connected world. In any case, it was said that not everyone strictly needed the coverage of a universal license, and law-abiding citizens had nothing to worry about. It was surprising how easy it was to subvert technology safeguards if one really wanted to. So much of society's good order relied on people policing their own behavior. The flaws in complex systems that were hidden to most were plainly seen by those who knew where to look. Gehazi arrived back to his pod and took a moment to review the trails from his meeting at the reputation management firm. He could see now that his advisor had been directing data to a personal bank rather than the more ubiquitous privacy bank. It was the hidden login address that gave it away, as there was no need to conceal connections to the privacy bank's location. It wasn't illegal, but it was certainly unusual. Placing the tile on his desk, he fed it his access codes and watched as the agent unexpectedly connected to Trivium's outer data rim via his system self. There was nothing at risk in the outer rim, but even so, he'd put extra fail-safes in place. Gehazi sat back to watch and learn as the tile went about his business. So in this final scene that I'll be reading, Gehazi is meeting with Asaro. You're looking for the location of Trivium's territorial data reserves, he said. You're after the training data for the legal reasoning models, aren't you? Gehazi accused her. But why? The models are already in the public domain. Why do you need the training data? I saw the search routines that your tile set loose, he said. There's no point denying it, Gehazi pressed. I'm grateful for the reputational management advice you provided, but tell me why I shouldn't report this to the authorities. What's going on here? Asaro looked at him silently as he held his gaze. I'm worried about the upcoming vote to raise the Lagrange point, she said. But the modelling shows that the higher Lagrange point diminishes both crime and conflict. What does the training data get you? He pressed again. ... Thank you.
Thank you so much, Andy, for this story. Yeah, also really interesting to see you presenting this story, also about the universal law, then also a story that takes place in Rwanda. So it was really, yeah, exciting for us all to read the story and also, yeah, think about the themes that are within this story, or within all the stories we heard of. Also the story from Jason Fernandez, which was actually like where there were so many different AI systems that there were, then we need to, I think I wrote it down then, okay, yeah, this system, and they are all in conflict with each other, and the bot that helped then the persecutor. It was really, really interesting to read all of that. But before I talk all the time, we have now 10 to 15 minutes actually for the audience to ask questions to our authors, to the stories, or also, yeah, to the stories, or also like personal questions like how was the writing experience. So yeah, I give it to the audience. If you have any questions, please raise your hand and I will give you the microphone. Okay. Yeah, you can go on before. Yeah, thanks.
It's a very simple question, actually. Why Rwanda?
Yeah, Kimon asked me about that before earlier, which gave me a chance to think about it because, yeah, I mean, it kind of came through the creative process. I mean, I've never been there. I have had some friends who went several years ago, and they really raved about the experience and the way that the country has been transforming itself and since the genocide. And so I did a lot of reading, and I think one of the things when you're thinking about the future, you try and project and think, well, how are things going to change? And if I look at what's going on in different parts of the world, I was thinking about, what are the conditions now that might mean certain countries develop in a certain way? And I think, from what I understand, Rwanda's got a lot of really great things going on that make me believe that there's something else in their future. And I don't know what more to say than that. It just kind of fit with the story, I guess.
Thanks. Then to Yeliz.
Someone's like on the line. Okay, I have a lot of questions to all of you, but I'm just gonna wait. My first question is to Jason, but I think to to answer this question, you need to a little bit explain about the different models that you use throughout the stories. Because I was like, for a second, I thought the relationship, if you ever watched the HBO series Succession, I felt like the DGK, the relationship that he has with his alleged son represents like this, our understanding of like a bias towards our son, like the daddy issues was there, but the GPT embodiment didn't carry them with it. So why did you make a difference between the actual father and the GPT embodiment? Is that it was like, was it intentional or, I don't know, coincidental? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. And I have seen Succession, and I love Succession. And probably the relationship between Logan and Kendall influenced me, at least subconsciously, I guess, when I was creating Paul and David Kaczynski. I think the main thing for me that DGK was sort of that's the function of that model in the story, is to show that here's another model, and the sort of specific instructions that DGK is given or had to adhere to is just to maximize shareholder value. So DGK is ostensibly like a GPT instantiation of Paul's dead father. But really what it's doing is it's more loyal to the firm than to his own son, which in a way is sort of like how his real father acted in real life, as you can see like from the details in the story. So I think I just wanted to set up these different models with different sort of incentives that are given to them, and DGK's incentives are basically like, you are a director, even though you're sort of a GPT model, and your loyalty must be to the firm.
Thanks. Here? Yeah, Joost before? Yeah. And afterwards? No, don't want to jump to queue. Now, I had a question to you, Leevi. An interesting thought in the part of your story that you skipped before the part that you read out is where you basically present the hypothesis that if we have personalized stories and movies or series written or created by AI models, we stop having something common to talk about, right? That it kind of brings an end to commonality maybe and to conversation. I thought it was a very interesting thought that you might want to elaborate on.
Thanks, I'd love to. Yeah, I think like inspiration basically starts from a very simple observation. What does a world look like where everybody writes a book but nobody wants to read one? You know, I think, you know, let's be honest here. Like who of us these days doesn't feel just being overwhelmed with like the idea of like plowing through an entire book, you know? But at the same time, we are saying that, you know, with these ChatGPT, you know, all sorts of generative AI models, everybody can write a book. And I do find that a bit of like a fragmenting experience as well, because this kind of the shared stories, shared reference, shared ideas are the kind of things that bring us together as well, I feel. I was thinking about this as well. There is a part of the story which also deals with kind of what is the role of human writing at this time. And there was there's a platform called Clark's World, which is about you know, a venue for publishing science fiction stories that had to close down a year ago because it was completely filled with the AI-generated stories. So I think where that really starts from is the fact that, you know, a lot of the kind of things that, you know, we kind of talk about and we kind of experience, and we kind of, the kind of relations that we have with each other are mediated by like there was you just talked about succession, you know, like there was these are kind of things that we both saw the same thing and we understand those references, and then we kind of, we make sense to each other, you know. But when we start thinking about practice of like movies or books in a way that it's just for our consumption, you know, I want to watch a movie and say like to ChatGPT that make me a very Quentin Tarantino-like movie, you know, or like Sora model to be precise. Like then we lose that kind of place where you could be like, oh, did you see that movie? And it's like, no, I made my own, you know. So I think that's one of those things. And then there is this kind of idea that, you know, at first level you say like make something like Quentin Tarantino, but then at some point we start forgetting, like 15, 20 years down the line, we forget who this Quentin guy even was, and then we lose those anchors that bind us to some common reference. Did that make any sense? Fair enough.
Thanks. Yeah.
So thank you all very much for your excerpts. I look forward to being able to read all of the full stories. I'm assuming, like most writers of science fiction, that you're also readers of science fiction. And most people are inspired by other writers. What would, for each of you, be the one thing that you would say was most inspiring for you in I think most cases, first serious attempt to write? Who do you think was most influential on your writing?
Maybe we start with Jason?
Yeah, no, it's a good question, but I feel like I don't have a good answer for it. When I was younger, I loved science fiction as a genre, and I feel like I would read a lot of, you know, like Orson Scott Card, the Dune series. So those were some Ursula Le Guin. So I think those were very formative when I was younger. But then recently I've been reading a lot more realistic and literary fiction. So like Lauren Groff and Ben Lerner, and I feel like that sort of prose style, I guess, is something that really appeals to me. So I guess when I write, I try to like blend the two, like the sort of like writing style of a lot of contemporary realists with the ideas of a lot of the science fiction that I first fell in love with.
Thanks.
Yeah, great question. I would say, and this is going to become passé because everyone mentions, Frank Herbert and Dune, of course, popularized by the movies. But seriously, that was one of the first more serious science fiction I read, and I just found it so esoteric, and it's just so rich, and yeah. So, but I think more recently, I've really enjoyed reading other short stories. Again, it's a little bit popular, but Ted Chiang, his vision and his science fiction short stories is amazing. But actually, reading short story fiction in general, I've been reading anthologies on short stories and stuff, and you don't need to just read science fiction to be able to get ideas, right? And so that's been really, really enjoyable recently.
Thanks. Yeah, I think there's one kind of direction where I kind of make a collage out of all the sort of influences, but I would be lying if I would say that it's not Ted Chiang, because it is. Like, it is like very strongly, for me, it's something I read Exhalation few years ago, and at that moment there was, I think, something very fundamental. I really like the kind of idea that you use science fiction in order to grapple with a thought, like in a way that it felt like it's a process of coming to terms with something that feels puzzling, and I think he's a very magician on that. But of course, like Dune. I'm also a sucker for Denis Villeneuve, so like I really love the movies as well. So, but I think like there are a lot of different kind of strands that that kind of have formed me who I am, but I think, these days, if I have to name a name, it's a Ted Chiang.
Okay, thanks. Natali, question? Yeah.
Okay, thank you so much, all three. I'm not sure if it's a question, actually, but for me, science fiction, and also your stories, is very much also an opportunity to think about the kind of decisions we make today. So I think yesterday or the day before, the Council officially approved the AI Act. Human oversight is a really critical instrument in there. So listening to your story makes one wonder what kind of mistakes to avoid to not end up in the situation. On the other hand, then listening to Jason's story is you also start to wonder who should oversee whom. So maybe at some point the AI is even more moral and more ethical and better informed. So I think it's also very interesting questions to reflect some of the choices we do now, and also your story is actually also very much about contestation and civil resistance, and what we can actually do and how far people would go to protect rights. So I think that's thanks again for that, and I think it's a lot of food for thought also, not only for science fiction writers but also for lawyers.
Thanks. I think we have time for one more question. Yeah, saw that, yeah.
Thank you very much. I'm also one of the luckiest people in the room because I read all the stories, and thank you very much again for this great pieces. I have a very short question. Did you write these short stories for this competition, or are they did you wrote them before? Just a curious.
Won't be disqualified.
No, I wrote it for the competition, and I think that's one of the wonderful things about what's been created here is, like I'm a first-time writer. It's really hard to because we read all the science fiction and we thoroughly enjoy it, and then when we try and write our own, we're like, oh, it doesn't sound anything like what I've been reading. So you go back and so the thing about the competition is it gives you a reason to kind of go, okay, I'm actually gonna. There's a deadline. I'm gonna keep going. It's not quite what I wanted. I'm gonna keep going. I'm gonna keep going. So yeah, it was the competition. Yeah.
Yeah, I think same for me. I did, as I said earlier, I think it was a gift to me as well, this competition, in a way, to sort of squeeze these out of myself, I guess. But yeah, I think it's, I started it for this. Like, I think the basic idea was like, that was on paper pretty fast. And then I had this painstaking work of trying to come to terms of like what I really write, and then you realize that there's a rhythm and I do have a I'm a Finnish by passport, and this is not my native in which we converse at the moment, so it takes a while to also because I start paying more and more sort of attention to that kind of process of really crafting words, and that's an art, and that took a long while. I think the big scaffolding was there in 3 days, and then I spent 4 months in trying to make that proper English. So, and I didn't even make it completely, but I tried my best.
Okay, thanks. And Jason?
Thank you. I also wrote this specifically for the competition, and I appreciated how the competition, I guess, presented an opportunity to explore these topics that I had been wanting to explore but hadn't yet.
Okay, thank you so much for your insights. Now we are coming to the last part of the competition, the announcement of the winner of today. But first, a round of applause again to Jason, Andy, and Leevi. It was a really insightful, engaging conversation. Also, thanks also for the audience for contributing to it. Just to give you a short overview how we came to the decision. So we published the call for this competition last August already, and we received 20 submissions by January 2024. And we read all of them, like Natali, Joost, Yeliz, and Deniz. We were the organizing committee. Also, thank you again for all of that. It was really enjoyable to work with you on that. So we read all the stories, all the 20 stories, and rated them in terms of originality, writing quality, and the relevance for information law. That were our broad criteria, but we also made, of course, some comments like, okay, this is really interesting, and I thought about it a long time, and so on. And then we had a meeting where we shortlisted 7 papers in the end. 7, not papers, 7 stories. Academic brain. We shortlisted 7 papers, and we gave that to an independent jury. So we also want to express our gratitude for the jury members, like Yeliz is here. Thank you again for being the jury member. We have Marta Larsen from Radboud University in Nijmegen. She was the winner of last year. She served in the jury. We have Mikola Markotic, I hope I could pronounce it correct, from the University of Bern, who is co-organizer of the first 2 competitions, and Bernd Hugenholz, who was the former director of the Institute for Information Law. And also the jury members, they rated all of the stories and made their comments, and then we had a long discussion who the winner of this year is. But that being said, we also appreciated really all the stories we gave to the jury, so all of the 7 stories. And we actually managed to publish the other stories already also on the Digital Constitutionalist blog. So the stories of Etienne Falk, Floris Kreiken, Fernando Barrio, and Catherine Warren, you can already read them there. And tomorrow we will also publish your stories there, so you can all read them. And also they are published on the IViR homepage. But now, back to our finalist. The jury members praised the high quality of writing, so don't blame yourself on writing. The Finnish English was really readable and really enjoyable. So that was, all the jury members agreed on that. The writing quality was really good. They were captivating, were fascinating reads, and what is more, all stories sparked discussions and critical thinking about the future of information law. So we had like really in the jury, but also we in the organizing team had so many insightful conversations about that. So that was amazing. And the jury members also said they reread some of the paragraphs of the stories to really dig deeper into the stories, dig into the concepts, and really think about the implications for law. So, but one story particularly stood out for us, and the jury especially praised the originality of the story, its writing style, as well as its thematic focus. This story deals with a current issue for information law that will be of utmost importance within the next years of research, and it also opens up a discussion about the ethicality of the use of future technology, while simultaneously and smoothly not answering the questions within the story itself, but leaving it up for the reader to decide. And also the story is a real page-turner. It is a fascinating read, and I read it multiple times. I think today in the train for the 5th time or something like that. So the winner of this year's competition is, Jason Fernandez with Good Bot. Yes, and we will, as being said, we will upload the stories tomorrow, and especially also in your story, Jason, what was really enjoyable to read, that you can see, when you read the story, you can see it, that it always switches also the narrative. So there's like a conversation window with the bot, and you can have the writing style there, and you worked so much with footnotes to give additional insights, and with all the different AI systems that were there in place. That was really fascinating, and all the jury members said like, okay, this is an amazing story. But also thank you again for Andy and for Leevi, and please also another round of applause for them for your stories. Okay, and now we can give the gifts, right?
Thank you. So for the winner, we have a certificate. I don't know if there's a camera here. Yeah, you can see. So we have a certificate we will email to you, unfortunately, as you're not here. But beyond that, we also named you a heavenly body. I think we got you a black hole in your name, and the printed certificate of the certificate to owner will be sent to you over email as well. Now, for those in the room, we have something tangible. So, Leevi.
Thank you so much.
It's in Dutch tradition you can unpack. And beyond that we have some Belgian chocolates.
Thank you so much.
And congratulations once again.
Indeed. Thank you.
And Andy,
Also, thank you.
for you too. And congratulations.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. And now to the last few minutes, and Yeliz prepared actually a virtual gallery of the winning story of Goodbot, and she will lead you through it.
Kimon, I want you to help me with this. Okay, since Jason is not here, it's a perfect gift for him. We tried to visualize what he told us through the format of his story. I tried to come up with what he actually meant in the story, what he wanted to tell us, what he wanted to inform us by establishing different kinds of AI models. As you can see, it's like Goodbot's short story by Jason Fernandez. The first room represents Paul Skoczynski's deposition, but as you can see, there are like AI bots, like the different visualization of AI bots revolves around the position, because I think, for me at least, Jason, correct me if I'm wrong, because I read this story maybe 15 times, I slept with it, I dreamt about it, so it was like, I spent a lot of thinking on it, but I might be still wrong about how to visualize it. For me, the story is not about Paul, but it's all about the AI models that we use nowadays, how we interpret them, how they actually influence our decision making, how we like use them in a very crucial decisions that we make. On our right corridor, my left, I always have problems with right. This is DGK. I actually wanted him to tell you more about this model, because I think this part of the story struck me the most, because this is the GPT embodiment of the Paul, and it's his late father. And his late father spent last 2 years of his life developing a GPT embodiment to take over his place in the board. Not his son, you need to read the story, not a real person, but a GPT embodiment. And it provokes a lot of questions. Can we actually do this? Is it doable? Is it feasible? Because it can happen. It's not a very distant future. And when we like walk through the aisle, like the next corridor, we see a deep analyst. We will see in a bit, hopefully, yeah, we'll be there. Yeah. This analyst actually responsible for all the catastrophic events happened a little bit further, Kimon. Yeah. Like a lot of catastrophic events happened in the story, but nobody actually knows why this model had these decisions. What is the motives behind them? What causes like this deep analyst to recommend Eclipse Empire to buy Mana and Aurora and use the same binding agent to create a Muller's disease that affects thousands of people? Because actually this model somehow like made these recommendations for another model. So this gallery all try to represent a new concept we're trying to develop. A gallery is the new paper, where we try to fusion law, technology, and art together to show the true power of science fiction, for the readers to interpret in a different way of what we read, and open the gates of the brains of the readers, the brains of the authors, through visualizing it. The gallery will be online next to the short story. I think it will make much more sense once you finish and read the story. But I'm super excited to hear Jason's thoughts about it. Maybe not now, but maybe later. Again, thank you so much. It was a delightful journey. It was super amazing. Especially these stories we received, they were breaths of fresh air after bombarding with a lot of legal articles on AI Act for a year now. So I appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah, and thanks to the audience for being here. It was amazing. Yeah, and I think we're done and we can go to the drinks now. So thank you.